We grow in emotional awareness. I think this was mentioned yesterday. In emotional authenticity, being able to be real with yourself and with others. So that's emotional vulnerability, where you're able to talk about those emotions. We grow in terms of accepting ourselves, and I'm borrowing from the work of Carol Rife in these points that I'm talking about here. And we grow in finding inner peace. I think one of the moderators yesterday talked about all of this is about how to find inner peace. And it's very important. When you're out of peace, even if you are perfectly healthy in your body, if your mind is not at peace, you are not well. Yeah. And a mind which is ill can destroy both mind and body. That when we see substance use, when we see suicide, the body might be perfectly well, but the mind is not, and the mind will eventually destroy everything. So we also grow in building meaningful relationships. We need to address the toxicity of loneliness. I think the US Surgeon General published a very long report that we all appreciated when they looked at the impact of loneliness on physical and mental well-being. And loneliness has a similar impact to smoking in terms of our physical well-being. It's not good for us. Human beings were meant to be interconnected, interdependent beings. We're not independent. If you're left on your own, you will die. You will die quicker than most. Yeah. So we need other people. And we're living in a very over-connected, digitally over-connected world, but increasingly emotionally disconnected world. So we have these relationships, but how real are they? How many friends do you have on Facebook? I think I've got 500. But of the 500, I probably have 10 who actually care about me, who actually know where I am right now, of the 500. The few people, my parents and my husband, who called and said, "Are you okay? Did you arrive okay? Are you safe?" Those are the people who are actually I'm interconnected with. The other 490, not sure who they are and what they represent in my life. So we need to be very deliberate about that and grow in that. Then we also need to grow in building psychological resilience, and this has been mentioned in many of our previous speakers' speeches. I'll borrow from something that Viktor Frankl said. So again, I'm the teacher in me. Please go and read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's an amazing book in terms of looking for purpose and meaning. And it's a book that has impacted my own life a lot. And he says he was a Holocaust survivor. He was a psychiatrist. So my interest in him was he was a psychiatrist. I'm a psychiatrist by training. And then I read his book, and then I realized the impact. Not only that he had experienced this horrific experience, but he had used it, and he had changed, and there was a beautiful post-traumatic growth in him. So he says, everything can be taken away from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any set of circumstances. So you can't eliminate stress. Even if we tried, we wouldn't be able to eliminate all the stresses in our lives. So life is a balance of trying to manage the stress around us, but building resilience to be able to cope with the stress that is around us. So coping is very important. Then creating psychologically safe families, communities, schools, workplaces, churches, where we feel safe, enabling environments that make us be able to thrive and be mentally well. Spiritual health, I won't belabor that. I think it has been covered very, very well by the previous speaker. It speaks to purpose. It speaks to meaning, it speaks to perspective, it speaks to hope. Sometimes all you have is hope, and hope is mentally protective. I remember during COVID, most of us, all we had was hope that it's going to get better. Then balance. I'll borrow from our previous speaker. Martha, you worry about so many things, but only one is important. So those were the words of Jesus when he visited Martha and Mary. And Martha was busy with the pots and cooking and hospitality. And then he said, hey, you're so busy. But what matters in this moment is being with me. So being able to know what to do, when to do it. Cooking is important, hospitality is important. But at that time, Martha was too busy with so many things that she got stressed, unnecessarily so. So we need to balance. We're human beings, not human doings. right? So, we're also growing as a region. So this is some data looking at mental health and some of the indicators that we measure for mental health in the region. Like I said, Cape Verde is doing extremely well. We'll talk about that. So suicide rate in Africa is still very unacceptably high at 11.2 per 100,000 population as of 2020. But it has decreased by 21% since 2014. That's progress. Then our laws, our policies, are they compliant with human rights conventions? That has improved from 41% to 68% in the last 10 years. And are we actually capacitating our systems to take care of mental health? So primary healthcare training of our doctors, nurses, midwives at primary care, that has improved as well slightly, but it has improved by 14%. Then, that is the health workforce is what is improved by 14%, but the primary healthcare workforce has improved significantly. So a lot of countries are now training their doctors, their nurses, their primary healthcare workers in mental health, and this is within the region. Government expenditure on mental health, and Cape Verde is doing extremely well. There's an investment in mental health in this country, which is to be commended and celebrated. In the region, we've moved from 10 cents per head per year to 46 cents per head per year. It's not a lot. It's far from the global median, but it's a big improvement, and it's something to be celebrated and encouraged. And then are we keeping a track of how we are doing? We've talked about mental health a lot here. Are we measuring? Are we doing any better as the years go by? A lot of countries are now actually recording the mental health data from 3% to 11%. And the last one about mental health and psychosocial support preparedness. So during COVID, we saw a lot of challenges in terms of mental health psychosocial support, and it was measured only in 2020 that 28% of countries integrate mental health into their disaster preparedness. So there's progress. However, when we talk about growth, we also have to acknowledge that things are still there's still challenges. The next slide, maybe it's me. Yeah, okay, all right. So we still have the highest suicide rate in the world in this region, which is a problem. We have a lot of stigma. 50% of countries don't even have a mental health awareness program within the country. There's limited, psychosocial support preparedness. Like I said, only 28% of countries. The functionality of our primary healthcare systems is only at 13%. So actually having mental health integrated into primary care, that's a challenge. There are gaps in our data. There's definitely a problem in terms of financing and money, and a previous speaker talked about that we can't talk about all of this without talking about the actual financial investment within mental health. And of course, our policies being outdated. The next one, how do we empower our communities? How do we improve things? Primary care or community care is the basis. Most of the people who need mental health care need to be taken care of in the community, in our families, in our churches, in our traditional settings. That's where we'll get most of the care. And this includes self-care, taking care of oneself. There are things that you need to take responsibility for and take care of oneself. But the community is very, very important. So we need to empower the community. Then primary health care, then all of these specialized services. But as you see, we need less and less resources as we go up if we invest in the community. Next one. How do we do that? We need to raise awareness like we're doing in this conference. We need to understand the biological, the psychological, the social, the spiritual causes of mental health challenges and how and when to seek for help. We need to support self-help. Like I said, empower people. There are things we can do for ourselves. We can exercise like we were doing yesterday with the physiotherapist. We can eat right. We can connect better with others. Those are very important things that I can do for myself. And the other resources I'll share just now. We need to integrate our mental health awareness into our schools, our workplaces. We need to capacitate our community health workers and primary health care workers to know what to do when someone comes into their office, in their clinic, and they start crying. What do I do? They need to be empowered to know what to do. And we need to transform our services so that they're dignified, they're integrated, they're accessible, they're timely in terms of the care that we're providing. We also need meaningful engagement with people with lived experience. Someone who has experienced a mental health challenge or lives with a mental health challenge should be included in planning, should be included in how the services are organized because it affects them. And lastly, we need a whole society approach. I think this was said before. It's a multi-sectoral approach. This is beyond the health sector. it's larger than that. It's a whole society approach because mental health goes beyond that. Next one. So I'll stop here. I'll end with this. These are some of the products that WHO has, evidence-based products that you can make use of in terms of empowering communities. So does this work? Okay, that's not working. So in the corner there, first, Doing What Matters in Times of Stress was a booklet that was produced during the COVID pandemic, and it's a very helpful booklet. You can actually download it. It's free online, and you can start reading it and using it and do the exercises. It's a self-help book. So you can actually use that. It's free online. Then, sometimes we need a bit of help. So there's Self-Help Plus. So it's the same booklet, Doing What Matters in Times of Stress, but you're now in a group with others. And there's a facilitator, maybe a community health worker, maybe a pastor, maybe a social worker who's helping you to go through the booklet, Self-Help Plus. Then, group interpersonal therapy, and this is something that Cabo Verde is already implementing. The training has already been done, training of trainers, and is going to be rolled out. So group interpersonal therapy looks at some of the major stresses that causes depression, which are interpersonal in nature. Grief, usually, a dispute, interpersonal challenges, isolation, and interpersonal therapy, group interpersonal therapy addresses those things. Very useful, can be facilitated by someone who's not a mental health expert. So it can be a community health worker, a social worker, or a health worker who can facilitate that in the community. Early adolescent skills for emotions is a toolkit for adolescents who are living in adversity, who need to know how to regulate their emotions, manage their emotions and the challenges that they have. Again, a tool that is readily available. Then psychological first aid is for disaster situations, crises, how we can approach someone who has faced a terrible crisis or trauma. The image gap was mentioned by our Director General yesterday. It's a training tool for primary health care. Cabo Verde has already implemented this in training primary health care workers in management of mental health. Then the psychological interventions implementation manual, the Director General mentioned it yesterday as well in his speech. And this one just gives you a summary of all of these tools that I've talked about and how to choose, which one to choose for your nation. Then mental health at work, there's a policy brief and also a guideline where organizations can know how to integrate mental health systems into workplaces because we spend a third of our lives at work. Lastly, WHO quality rights. This is something that I would encourage Cabo Verde to take up. I think it is about improving the quality and the way, the dignity with which we treat people with mental health challenges. It's something that has been rolled out in some countries in Africa, and it increases the quality of services. And it can be done by anyone. It's not just healthcare workers. Any community member can do it. The first part of the training is online and free. You just go, you sign in, and you do a little course, 9 or 12 modules, and you get your certificate, and you know more about how to treat someone with a mental health condition in a dignified, respectful manner. So I'll stop there. Those are my contacts if you want to know more about these products or anything else that I've said. And I know I've gone over time. Apologies to our moderator. Thank you.